Hi, my name is Gisella Carrick, and I'm a quantum technique practitioner. And today I'd like to introduce three guests that I have that are also clients of quantum techniques who have gone through QT and done healings at different levels. Each one has had a different issue, and I'd like for prospective clients and clients that are going through the process to get an idea of what it is to be on the other side of the healing of better health. I'd like to introduce my first guest. It's Loretta Carr, and second, Deborah Klausing and Sheila Winters. So say hello, ladies.
Hello. Hello.
Okay. We're going to start this out first just by having Loretta talk about a little bit about herself and what she has experienced with quantum techniques and what questions she's had. The purpose of this call is for people to have, basically I get the same questions from clients that are coming on board or people that are going through the process at different levels. They ask questions like, how long does it take to heal? What illnesses have you helped with or QT helped with? What do people do? Do they experience blocks? And every single client that I have on the phone today has gone through some level of that. So I'm going to allow them to talk and then explain what they've gone through with QT and where they are with it. So, Loretta, go ahead and introduce yourself and get started.
My name is Loretta Carr, and I'd like to start out by saying that I was diagnosed with environmental illness probably 10 years ago, although I realized that I was experiencing it probably for 20-some years. And I got to the point where I could no longer function as a human being. I had electromagnetic sensitivity, so I couldn't be around any kind of electrical appliances or electricity, anything like that, and I went for treatment at the Environmental Health Center in Dallas, which did help me. I can't say that it didn't. However, it got me to a point where I could still live, but I felt like I wasn't living. I still had to live in a bubble. I could not go out anywhere. I still had to wear a mask. I couldn't be exposed to perfumes, colognes, and things like that, any toxins. And I had met Gisella when I was at the center, and she was basically in the same shape I was in. Not that I want to tell your story, Gisella, but she went back east and had called me. I was still in Dallas and had called me and said, I found this quantum technique, and it's really helped me. And I said, yep, good for you. I'm not doing that voodoo stuff anymore. I did so much of it that I don't want to do it. And I resisted that for probably a year. And Giselle, though, didn't give up on me. She kept calling me to tell me how much better she kept getting. And I said, good for you. I'm glad that you're better. And I'm still not going to do voodoo medicine. And I moved to Idaho, had built a green home, a safe home. And I was here, I don't even think 6 months, and I had a heart attack. And I had started to almost for 2 weeks leading up to it, I was extremely exhausted. I couldn't walk not even 5 feet without getting out of breath. And I'm a nurse, and I knew that something was going on cardiovascular-wise, but I ignored it. And after I had the heart attack, I called Gisella in desperation. And she said to me, did God have to give you a heart attack to make you listen? So I said, okay, I'll give this stuff a try. And I didn't believe in it, but I thought, what do I have to lose now? Because I've lost everything else as far as I was concerned. So she gave me a treatment, and I couldn't get over how much better I felt. And that was after the first treatment. By the second treatment, I called her again a couple days later because I was still experiencing a lot of tachycardia and shortness of breath. And it all came back, and I realized today that a lot of that was the fear of I think the fear of dying. After my second treatment, I could not believe the difference because everything was gone. My energy returned. I was no longer short of breath. The tachycardia stopped. I was told by the physician that I had a heart attack. And when I went 6 weeks later, because it takes forever in Idaho to get you in to see somebody, for an echocardiogram, nothing showed up. My heart looked fine. There was no indication that I had even had a heart attack. And that convinced me after the second treatment that there's really something to this and that it's really not voodoo. So I started treating with Gisella, and I slowly, within 6 months, I noticed that I didn't have to wear a mask when I went out. I was able to go to church, and I love my faith, and I love going to church. And I was able to go. I would still get some reactions in church, but I would start to release the codes on myself. And I was actually able to stay in church the whole time without having to walk out, run out.
Loretta, you were still struggling after 6 months. There were still some.
Oh yeah. I mean, I didn't get completely well overnight. It was a process for me. And
you felt there was a lot of up and down with just your treatments.
Yes.
Okay.
And I would, sometimes I had to do 2 or 3 treatments a week. And I slowly began to notice that things were changing. I stayed off all the foods I was told to stay off of. Every now and then I would blow it and lose the treatment, and I learned very quickly not to do that. And then I noticed after, and I was up and down, I would say for what, about 2 years, year and a half, but even though I was up and down, my life was starting to become whole again. And I was able.
You were getting a life back. That's what you.
I was getting my life back. I was able to go to my AA meetings because I'm in recovery, and it was just amazing for me without having to sit there, get tachycardia, have to get up and run out because I'd break out in a sweat and couldn't think. That was no longer happening. Although I was still getting reactions, they were not as profoundly disabling as they used to be, and I was able to clear them. But the thing I noticed the most was if I walked into a store and got hit with something, I could go outside, get some fresh air, and I would clear immediately. That never happened to me before that.
So in the past, before the treatment, if you got an exposure, it wasn't something you could walk outside or release a code, right?
No. I would, it would take days of, doing my saunas and doing all the things that I needed to do to get myself back on track. If I got hit with something, it would take me days to get back on track. Not be able to walk out, take a breath of fresh air, release a code, and I'm fine.
Right.
So for me, that was just absolutely amazing. I did hit a time where I thought, oh, God, this isn't working. This just isn't working anymore. And what I realized after talking to Gisella was that it was my parts. It was my parts that were really they were all starting to come up, and they were starting to sabotage me. And so once I started doing the parts work, I found that I could even do, oh my gosh, so much more.
Well, let me stop you for a second, Loretta.
Mm-hmm.
Explain what parts are. Parts are basically, they're you, and they're compartments that we create throughout our lives to help us with dealing with emotional traumas throughout our lives. And so from you working with Loretta, and she'll be the first to tell you, she had a lot of these parts, a lot of traumas, things in her life that had occurred, prior to her becoming as sick as she had been. A lot of things that she basically stuffed away. So on a physical level, you did a lot of healing, but then when you hit this part of you, basically this where you had to do
non-physical.
Yeah, the non-physical, the emotional, you felt like you basically went backwards or got stuck, right?
I did.
Yeah.
I felt like, okay, this is it. This is the best it can be.
Right.
And it wasn't. As I began working with my parts and doing the parts work, I realized that the best was yet to come. And by the second year, I was on an airplane going to Georgia, and then I was on an airplane going to Florida. And I couldn't travel on an airplane for the last 7 years. I couldn't even go near an airport, let alone go in an airport, sit in an airplane with all the people with all their fragrances on and the pesticides and the whole thing. And I didn't feel bad. Did not feel bad at all. And that's when I realized that my life was back, that I actually had a life. And it didn't exist around, oh my God, what am I going to do next? How am I going to avoid this? How am I going to not eat this? How am I going to, there was always so many, stipulations on how I could live my life. And I was finding that no longer existed for me, and that I was free to be me. And I finally felt a sense of freedom I had not felt in probably 25 years. And a lot of that was, and I realized today, was the parts work. Even though I had been in therapy, I worked on issues, I I still had parts that were sabotaging me.
I'm glad you're bringing the therapy up, because one of the things I get from a lot of clients is they'll say, when we start bringing up these parts things, they'll say, well, I've worked on these for 25 years. I've done all kinds of different, therapies and different kind of modalities with dealing with emotional issues. Why am I doing this again? Did you feel, and I know you've told me you've done so many different things. Can you give an example of something you did?
I mean, I was in therapy with, and I mean a really good therapist for 14 years, and she was good. And, I thought I had worked through all those issues, which I basically did work through the issues. However, what I didn't realize was there were parts there that were not healed, that still kept bringing up the fears and the traumas surrounding those issues. And that caused me a lot of problems. And, I did all kinds of things. I did John Bradshaw's stuff, which I'm sure people will recognize him. I did a lot of that. And I did it consistently for 5 years, all of John Bradshaw's workshops and healing, the inner child, healing the wounds that bind you. I did all that. But what I found was it still wasn't enough. That's why I wasn't healing, because we weren't dealing with or healing those parts issues, which I found were tremendous. And I believed in it anyway, because I always knew that there are parts of us that exist. I just didn't realize I had so many. And some of them were trying to help me, some of them were sabotaging me, because they felt more comfortable living in a state of chaos. And as I became more and more well, I found that I don't want to live in a state of chaos, and I don't want to live in fear. And I will say one thing about myself is I was always one of those people that I will try anything, even when I was told I was crazy, like especially medically. What do you mean you're going to do those IVs? Because I'm going to do them. So I think out of anybody that I know, and I think Gisella can speak for me this way, I think I probably did more than most people have done.
You did.
And I still was not well.
Yeah.
I mean, I did colloidal silver IVs. I did all the alternative stuff. I did hydrogen peroxide IVs. I mean, I did ozone IVs. I mean, I really did everything. And I still was not well. And I realized after my heart attack that I could not, this was not living. What I was doing was not living, it was existing. And that I was not going to live the rest of my life like that. And that I would get well. And quantum is what got me well. I mean, without a shadow of a doubt, quantum is what got me well. And my story is pretty dramatic. I mean, I had a lot of trauma in my lifetime as a child, as a young adult. As a married woman with children, I had a lot of trauma. And I lost a child. So there was so much connected to all of that. And it's no wonder why I didn't get well until we started addressing these parts issues. And that was the biggest thing for me, was the parts.
Great. I want to backtrack a little bit. I want to ask you something about the food, because and this is such a simple thing, but people sometimes will have questions or a hard time with this when when they start with quantum. We tend to tell people, okay, these foods are testing good, or these aren't testing real well for you, or toxic, and we ask that you don't eat them for the time being, or until your body has the chance to heal around this. How important did you feel it was for you to watch your foods while you were doing your treatments?
Extremely important. Extremely important. And I knew that just having been at the Environmental Health Center in Dr. Ray's with food. I mean, I was allergic to basically every food I was eating. And I had chronic pancreatitis, malabsorption, malnutrition. So I knew food was a huge obstacle for me as far as getting well. So, and
let me ask Sheila and Deborah also, you guys, we haven't properly talked about your stuff yet, but just do you feel like the foods were also an important part of you being able to do quantum successfully?
Yeah, this is Sheila. Yes, it's huge, and it still is for me. I'm still working with my foods. I still test all my foods, and I find that if I don't, I sometimes do have a problem. So I'm still really testing everything, and my supplements, it was huge for me. I found that my supplements were part of what was making me sick.
Yes.
I had drawers. Yeah. I had drawers full of them, and I'd stop them all because something was bothering me, and then, before I learned how to test, and then I'd go back and start them again, and it was just endless. And once I could test my food and my supplements, everything started to change for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you're bringing that up with the supplements because, again, we have a lot of clients, and I understand that come in, and there's a lot of fear around trying anything new, or they've been, all of us, myself included, you go through so many modalities, and you go through so many doctors and so many medications and supplements, and then you get to a place where you don't trust any longer, so it's hard to, believe when someone says, okay, don't eat this food, or don't eat this, or don't take these supplements. Which is why self-testing is such a huge thing, I think, for anybody coming into QT, or even if they don't ever do it, to learn to self-test, because that way you can test for yourself and know that you're doing the one, you're asking the questions and getting the answers.
Yeah.
But, yes, to know that, a lot of times the amounts of supplements that you're taking aren't necessarily the best thing for you, because just because something is, supposed to be good for the nervous system or the gut or this or that, doesn't necessarily mean it's good for you. So, yeah, the self-testing in that is actually very helpful. How about you, Deborah? What do you think about the foods?
The food compliance is critical in my mind. When Gisella first tested me, she advised me that I was gluten intolerant and dairy intolerant, cow dairy intolerant. And the thing with the intolerance, since your body can't digest it or break it down, taking energy that your body should be using for healing, and it's all ending up in your gut trying to digest stuff that your system just simply can't digest. It's putrefying in there. And I noticed after a couple of weeks of eliminating that from the diet, my energy just dramatically increased. And it wasn't always easy. I had a sweet tooth, and, of course, she said no sugar at all. So the first couple of weeks doing that, of course, my husband and daughter still were eating sweets, so I had a scripture on my refrigerator and kept saying in my mind, I can do all things through Christ. I can do all things through Christ. And after a few weeks, the cravings went away. And then, now I can walk in and a whole buffet of desserts, and it doesn't even bother me. But, I have to say the first couple of weeks were tough. But and the other thing, too, you brought up a good point about self-testing. In the beginning, I hadn't learned that skill yet, and I got caught in that pistachio recall and got food poisoning. So not only do you want to have food compliance by learning to self-test and test everything you eat, but also I'm finding there's a lot of bad bacteria and things on our food supply, and I could have avoided that if I had known. Unfortunately, the next week I was reviewing the DVD and learning it. But I think the self-testing is critical for your healing process and just for anybody out there to avoid things in our food supply that are toxic and will harm us.
Absolutely. That is such an important thing, myself included. When I learned to self-test, it was so freeing. Not only, one of the things that QT does try to teach is to have everyone learn to help themselves eventually. And that was such a big part of me being able to help myself and my family was learning to self-test. Mm-hmm. So if anyone does anything that, even if they don't continue, is I think they should learn the self-testing or get the Truth Techniques 1 through 4, I think, that will teach you how to do that, because it is. I mean, it's so freeing, and it's so inexpensive to be able to test yourself to a medication or a supplement or a food and avoid some of these things. So, yeah, I agree. Loretta, thank you. Is there anything else you want to add, or
I think it's important, too, with the self-testing. And the only thing I wanted to add was that I would get frustrated and with self-testing, and then all of a sudden it was like, boom, I could do it. And I think I do it very well.
I'm glad you're bringing that up, because actually that is a big, question people have. Sometimes they'll get frustrated and say, I just can't do this. I myself, honestly, it took me a long time to learn how to do it, and it was so frustrating because I thought I just can't. Part of it, and I think you guys can all relate, is we've lived in such fear when you're sick of everything and then of others that you just don't trust yourself. I didn't trust my testing. And after clearing some of those blocks and then just being able to be more confident in myself, I felt really empowered and was able to do testing, really well. I do have some clients that honestly will get it boom right off the get-go, but that's usually rare. So for those people that that are saying, this is so hard, I can't do it,
it takes time.
Yeah, it takes time, exactly. And
I want people to know that, because I think that because I'm stubborn, I keep pursuing something, but some people aren't, and I don't want them to give up, because it's important to know that it does take a while for some people to learn to self-test.
Yeah.
So that's all I wanted to add. Thank you, Gisella.
Okay. I do want to ask you one more thing, Loretta, and I'm going to ask you all the same question. You all can chime in now and answer if you want, but did you ever feel like you just weren't going to heal or weren't deserving, or, you heard all these great stories from me and like for myself, Beth Daniel, I remember hearing her story and others, and then just thinking, oh, it's just not going to be me. I know that it can happen, but it won't happen for me because I tried everything and nothing works.
Mm-hmm. I know I did. I felt that way. I thought, well, everybody else will get better, but I won't. I did feel that way for a while. Even in the very beginning, for 6 months to a year, I thought, this isn't going to work. Yeah. Even though I was getting better, I kept thinking, I'm only going to get to a certain point. Yeah. Boom. And then I'm on an airplane.
And I went through that myself. How about you guys, Sheila, Deborah?
I would say that I always felt deep down that I was going to get better. Mm-hmm. And I had a very good friend who always advised me not to be negative and not to listen to anybody that was negative. And that friend's on the phone today. She just said, never listen to the negativity, and there's a lot of it out there. Yeah. There's a lot of people that are telling you that you're never going to get well, you're always going to have to live like this, be realistic, accept it. I always knew deep down that I couldn't do that there had to be a way to get well. And I think that's why I finally went to QT, because that same friend kept telling me, you need to do this, it's going to help you. And I can't thank her enough for that.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And unfortunately, not everyone's like that. Most of us, and I have to admit, including myself, when I first started QT, of course, there's always a part of us that keeps us, calling or keeps us trying different things, because, we all wanted to get well and all wanted to survive. And that part of me kept me going. But I have to say that I know that for me, and this is in my faith, the part of me that believed in God and believed in healing, I knew that it was there for me. And then the other part, which listened to the negativity, the traumas in my life, the darkness, listened to that place where no, you can't get well, no, it'll happen for someone else, you're too sick, your injuries are too severe, that kind of thing, and nothing can heal you. Again, not trusting in God, not trusting in His ability. And for me, it was through QT that He did His work. So
do you remember, Gisella? It's Loretta again. I just kind of wanted to bring this up because I think you'll probably get a laugh out of this. But do you remember when we were in Dallas and I was going to do colonics, and you said to me, "Oh, I wouldn't do that."
Yeah.
And then I thought, oh, I better not do that. And then that's, that little pip inside of me, that stubbornness. Yeah. I call it one of my parts that kind of thought, heck with you. Then I finally said, you know what, I'm going to do this. And it did help me.
Yeah. And
then how the tide was turned when you kept saying to me, you got to do this, you got to. I'm like, yeah, right.
And then the fear, I understand.
The fear. It was the fear.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, fear takes control of a lot of us, especially with environmental illness. It becomes really hard to move forward. So, and throughout the process, the other thing to remember is there's changes. There's, I remember my first treatment with Beth. I had all kinds of weird sensations, and I got really scared. I thought, oh my gosh, something is really, really wrong. Not realizing my body was just healing, but you get to a place where you're almost used to that normal, really sick feeling, your own reactions, your own sensations. as horrible as they are, but you know them. And then so having something new come in and make me feel different was really frightening.
Mm-hmm.
That was something I had to overcome also.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, well, let's bring Deborah forward, and let's have Deborah tell us a little bit about her experience with QT. Deborah is a cancer survivor. I'll go ahead and let you continue, Deborah, or introduce yourself.
Okay. In fall of 2003, I was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. I was put on an extremely aggressive chemo regimen of 2 different types of chemotherapy. One of them, the very first day, they put me into anaphylactic shock. I mean, they almost killed me the first day with the chemo, but somehow I survived. I did the year of chemo, and I went into remission at the end of that year. Intuitively, though, I knew that the chemo had killed the cancer, but it did nothing to change the terrain of my body that allowed the cancer to develop in the first place. So I started seeing holistic doctors, doing alternative therapies. I went to conventions, the Cancer Control Society meetings, the Health Freedom Expos, anything I could to try and change the terrain of my body that allowed it to develop. At the same time, my oncologist was giving me maintenance meds and medications, and one by one, over the last 4 to 5 years, they all stopped working. So he started discussing chemo with me again, and I almost passed out because, you know, like I said, they nearly killed me the first time I did the chemo, and I'm like, oh, you can't be serious. And I was praying for a solution, and a friend of my husband's, and for some reason, instead of calling the cell phone, he called the house. I picked up the phone and told him the situation, and he told me all about QT, and it sounded unusual to me, but I thought, well, I've tried everything else under the sun during the last 4 years, and absolutely nothing has worked. So in January of this year, I began QT, and the first recommendations were, of course, the toxins and food intolerances to completely change my diet, and also she gave me the custom codes to start reading the codes. Within a few weeks, my energy levels were better than they had been in 4 years. And then the very next month, I started having nosebleeds again. I had had them for about a year and a half. I had seen ear, nose, and throat specialists. I had ointments. They went in there and cauterized it. And over the course of a year and a half, nothing would permanently get rid of it. So I told Gisella about the nosebleeds, and she pulled that into the treatment code, and the nosebleeds have stopped. So I continued with QT. The energy was good. The nosebleeds were gone. My tumor markers were not coming down, so that was a little discouraging at first. But then, you know, I realized it took 4 years for my body to get into this condition, and it had only been, 2 or 3 months, and so I needed to just stay the course and stick with QT. So the good thing was, with the increase in energy and the nosebleeds gone, I knew something good was happening, and the markers had stopped going up. So they weren't coming down yet, but at least they had stopped going up like they had done every month for over a year. So we continued the process, and I had scans last month, and my blood work, the tumor markers were normal. So it's just incredible, the journey. I'm still, of course, receiving treatment. My body is holding, some of my immune pathways are holding the treatments, but not everything is holding by itself yet. So I'm continuing with QT, and, looking forward to the day when, my body can be stronger and maintain and hold all this healing capacity within itself.
Deborah, how did you feel about doing the parts work for you, the emotional stuff? Did you feel that was necessary? Could you see the connection in that in your health?
Yeah, the parts work was critical on a conscious level. Like when I was diagnosed, it was actually a second diagnosis for me, because in 2000, 9 years ago, I'd been stage 1 with a 98% cure rate. And so when it had come back, I thought, gosh, I want to be healthy. I trusted God for healing. Why is this back? And I had no idea on a conscious level I really wanted to be healthy, but I had parts that were continuing to make me sick. They were actually releasing irregular cells and pathogens, trying to punish an abusive father I had as a child. They thought by releasing those cells that they would be punishing me, but he is since long deceased, so all it was doing was harming me, but I was totally unaware of it.
So the part work was also very helpful to you, it sounds like.
Yes, because if the tumor markers would not be normal if the parts were running rampant like they were when I first started QT, because they were just releasing all this stuff and allowing me to stay sick. So any improvement that I would have, the childhood parts were sabotaging and not allowing the healing to be maintained.
I'm glad that we're bringing this up in a different aspect with you, with having survived cancer, because one of the things with, and Sheila and Loretta can attest to this, is when you have environmental illness, as we did, when you go see traditional doctors or even, alternatives, sometimes people will think that this is emotional, this is all in your head. This disease doesn't really exist. And one of the things I try to convey to clients, especially environmentally ill clients, is that, every disease process that we work with, I've got clients that I treat that have Parkinson's. I've worked with people with irritable bowel, different disease processes, cancer, not just DI, but everyone has these parts. Everyone has things in their lives. Usually when you get to a place of chronic illness, then there are things in your life that you aren't able to resolve, and your body starts, sending you these messages. So it's good to hear from you, Deborah, because then, other clients can hear and say, okay, I'm not crazy. Someone's not telling me. This is just all in my head.
Right.
Does anyone want to say anything about that?
Oh, it's Loretta again. I found, I think for me, I was fortunate that physicians that I knew, because I'm also a professional and a nurse, knew me well enough. My family physician knew me well enough that he said, I don't know what's wrong with you, but one thing I do know, you're a lot of things, Loretta, but crazy isn't one of them. But my family and all my friends, they treated me like it was all in my head. My family completely abandoned me when I got very, very sick and said that I needed to be committed to a mental institution. And that was hard for me, on an emotional level, but I still managed to have a couple people in my life that knew that that wasn't the fact, that knew me well enough that I wasn't crazy. But it's very frustrating out in, the world of medicine, because they don't look at these things that way. If they can't treat it, you're labeled crazy.
Yeah, if they
can't
figure
don't
out what's
understand
wrong.
it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's not about you. It's about their own inadequacies and frustrations and, ignorance to the fact that there are so many things that they don't understand but choose not to understand it.
Right. And you're right. It's looked at differently. I survived melanoma, and it was different. People, friends, family members, society, physicians, everybody was so helpful and so understanding with that. And then that's not in my head. It was just, I have an illness. And then when I developed environmental illness, and it became, you're nuts. This is, you just need to go take
and I mean, no, I don't want to discount anybody's stuff. I know Deborah's had a terrible time. But with environmental illness, it's like I said to my family, if I had cancer, you would, and I said it to my friends, if I was diagnosed with cancer, you'd treat me differently.
Yeah.
Because one of my friends had cancer, and everybody was surrounding her and, really supporting her, and they completely just abandoned me. And and I said to them, because it's not understood. And I think I think environmental illness is much more an epidemic than people realize. And I say epidemic because so many people have it that don't know, that are walking around undiagnosed and put on all kinds of medication that, basically are harming them more than helping them.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Deborah, is there anything else that you want to add that you feel that would be helpful to others in your situation?
Well, I think it would be important just for them to follow the practitioner's advice on the food compliance and any supplements, learn how to self-test, and then just to stay the course. You know, it takes your body many years to get into a cancerous condition. And, you know, everybody wants the silver bullet. You know, they want something, pop a pill and have it be gone. You know, healing is a process, and you're reprogramming your body how to kill the cancer cells itself if it comes up, and how to do its own healing. And that just takes time. And like I said, I was discouraged the first, 3 months because I didn't see a dramatic drop in my tumor marker right away. But at least I could see, my energy was better. I was looking for other things, other signs to show, hey, this is really doing something. My energy was better, the nosebleed stops. And then, I stayed the course, stuck with doing my treatment codes, doing the food compliance, self-testing. And then now, my markers are normal. In fact, it was funny, the doctors, you always have to call to get results. They were so excited. They called me, and they said, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. So I haven't really explained it to them yet because, I know that the typical medical establishment would just, write it off. But I'm like, okay, I'll keep doing it. So the most important thing is to get started right away and to be patient and stay the course. Your body will heal, but it does take time. It took a long time to get this sick, this chronically ill, and it takes a while to get out. So you just have to be patient and diligent about following your practitioner's guidance.
Great. Thank you, Deborah. Okay, next we're going to let Sheila Winters is also recovered from environmental illness, and we're going to let her tell us a bit about herself and her journey with QT.
Yes, I think my story is similar to most people with chronic illness, especially chemical sensitivity. It started a very long time ago, 26 years ago, and after a big exposure to termiticide. And I was sick for a lot of years, and nobody knew. I went to doctor after doctor, and I got the same story. And you're crazy. It's all emotional. There's nothing wrong with you. There were very few foods I could eat, and I just felt afraid all the time. I would pass out, black out. And over time, I worked with my uncle who was a homeopath, and he tried to help me through it. And I did get better, but I never regained my health. I never had an immune system. I was sick all the time. But I was alone. I was single, and I had to work. So I managed to get through it, and I got better and better. And then things started to go bad for me about 8 years ago. I started having a lot of different problems, and it was one thing after another. And then I moved into a new house, and I went down. I just got so sick. And it was another exposure to termiticide. My nerves were just burned. I was just vibrating, shaking all the time. Nausea constantly. Couldn't find anybody to help me. And finally, I had a friend who told me about the Environmental Health Center, and I went there and started to learn about the environmental illness and how to get the pesticide out of my body. And I worked with that for a long time. I did a lot of the same things that Loretta did, all the IVs and sauna, and all those things helped me. And I felt that my health, I had regained some of my health, but it was very, very slow, and it was never really getting me back into the world. I was still stuck in my home, couldn't see my friends, couldn't see my family, really couldn't do anything outside of my house or going for a walk in the mountains or something. That was about all my life was. My husband was doing all the cooking and everything because I was living in the dark. I had no electricity. I was so sensitive to it. I could barely ride in the car. And it was just, I was a prisoner. And even though my blood work was looking better and my doctors were saying I was getting better, I knew that there was something else. And Loretta kept telling me about quantum. And I kept saying, I don't think that's for me. I was very skeptical. And I just continued on my path of trying to find other therapies that would help me. And I did some energy work, which did help. And finally, I realized after someone else said to me, I was talking one day with another friend, and I said, when people talk about their childhood, I don't understand how they remember all this, because I don't remember anything. Very, very few things about even being a child. And she just looked at me and she said, it's all caused by trauma. And I said, I don't remember any trauma in my life, that was that devastating. And then I started looking into the QT because they were talking about parts, and I thought, well, maybe there is something there. So the last time my friend called and told me about QT, I said, I'm going to try it. And I called Gisella, and the first time I talked to Gisella, I was on the phone with her for about 10 minutes, and I started feeling physically ill. I thought I was going to pass out, throw up. I just felt awful. And I told her, I said, no, I've got to get off the phone. I'm feeling really sick. And she said, oh, hang on for a minute. Hang on. It's going to be okay. And within a minute, it was gone. And I would say on the second call to Gisella, we started working on my electrical sensitivity. My husband was gone at the time. He was gone for a week. And by the time he came home after that week, every light in the house was on. And he just came running in. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional. He just came running in and said, what's going on? Is something wrong? And I said, no. It's okay now. I can have the lights on. I'm really healing from this problem. And I think that was the first big step for me, was getting my electricity back, heat in my home, being able to cook. And then Gisella started getting me to go out in the world. She'll say, go to the mall and ask your body how long you can stay at the mall and how long you can do this, and it would be okay. And I'd go for 5 minutes and then 10 minutes. And then after a while, I could just go whenever I wanted. And I ordered all these, the QT self-testing information, the DVDs, and I learned to do all the self-testing for my foods, my supplements. And it seemed like it was maybe 2 months or 3 months before I really started feeling better. And I really began to heal. And we started working with parts, and I realized that all of this was what was keeping me from healing. And I just feel like it gave me my life back. And I'm very grateful for it. And I just continue to work with it. I've been going on trips, and on my last trip, I found that I was having a lot of problems with sleeping. And after the second day on the trip, my husband said, I think we better turn around and go home. And I said, I'm not giving in to this. I know that I can get through it. I'm going to do it. And by about the fourth day, it subsided, and I was able to enjoy myself. I had a wonderful time. I had no other problems, and I'm just well.
It's an amazing story. That's wonderful.
It was wonderful. It is wonderful. Mm. When you're that sick that your whole life is going to the doctor and taking supplements and doing treatments and having needles stuck in your veins constantly, it's just amazing when you get to this point and you realize that you don't have to do any of that anymore. I was very fortunate. My friends and my family stuck with me through the whole thing. They even understood the electrical sensitivity. They questioned about it. They were interested. I was very, very fortunate in that way, and they helped me through the whole thing on the phone. I wasn't able to see them for 5 or 6 years, but they sent me cards and letters and called me when I could talk on the phone, and I was very fortunate in that way, and I had a husband who was very supportive and stuck with me through this whole process.
That's wonderful. That's amazing. What did you think, Sheila, when you first heard about QT and they said, oh, it's just done over the phone, and you don't have to ever leave your house? Because I thought that was a little strange when I first heard that.
Well, I first heard about this from another person. I was treating with a doctor down in Scottsdale, and there was a lady that lived in Prescott that told me about quantum. And she explained it to me in detail, and when she left, I just looked at my husband and rolled my eyes like, oh, right. Someone's going to give me a code over the phone, and that's going to take care of this serious illness that I'm experiencing. So I laughed at it. I thought it was ridiculous. And she approached me again a couple of years later, and she was doing very well. And she said, I really think that you should look into this. And I had the same feelings at that time that just wasn't what I was going to do, that it wasn't the path I wanted to take. But when my friend Loretta, who I met in Dallas, and I knew how sick she was telling me how much better she was getting and that I needed to try it, I was finally convinced that, what the heck, I tried everything else. I might as well try this.
Yeah, and that's exactly, I think, where Deborah and I also had gone to, and all of us really, is a place where I know for me when I tried QT, it was I had done everything else, and I was at a point where I had no hope and just was ready to call it quits. My body was, and I was emotionally, and I, did QT because it was just the last thing I think that I could possibly think of doing. And I too, when I heard about it, I'd heard about it before, years before I was at the clinic. I had gone to the environmental health clinic also, and did the same thing you did. Oh, okay, whatever. Here's something else that someone is bringing that doesn't work. I know for me and many of the clients, actually I've got a few right now, they're still waiting for that magic pill, so they'll take something, or someone tell them there's some miraculous new surgery and this will take care of everything. And this is talking about the environmentally ill people, and it didn't happen for me. And I had a great deal of faith. I felt very lost and very scared. And for me, quantum helped me just kind of put everything into perspective as far as my emotional stuff, and it also dealt with the physical stuff. So yeah, it was hard for me to believe at first that, even though I did it, it was like I kept saying, how is this possible? It's over the phone. They don't ever touch you, they don't ever do anything, they don't see you, so how can it work? And I guess that's part of just having faith sometimes.
Yeah, and I think seeing someone heal that was very, very ill, and you watched them, they couldn't even find one food that they could eat, and then have them call you and tell you that they were eating, just testing their food, and they could eat almost everything. It was just unbelievable to me that something could change that for someone so quickly. Because I can remember seeing people in Dallas who had absolutely no food that they could eat. I saw people there who couldn't even drink water. Right. It was just horrible.
Yeah.
I was never that bad on food, but I saw enough of it, to know that it could be the problem, a lot of the problem.
Right. Loretta was. I know when I met Loretta, she was one of those people that had food was such a big issue for her. She couldn't eat much of anything.
The pancreatitis, I think, was having pancreatitis from just eating food. Was that was a real struggle for me because I was down to 88 pounds, and I'm 5'3". I was pretty emaciated. The one thing I wanted to say too that I think is important, and I was watching Dr. Oz, Oprah's doctor, and someone asked him, what do you think the future of medicine is going to be like? And he said, the future of medicine will be energy medicine. That's the future of medicine. And, having done this, I'm like, ooh, I'm way ahead of him, because
we're in the future.
I'm in the future, and I don't know if he understands. Maybe he does, but I think he does understand. And the thing for me that I could easily digest this and was because it is based on physics. E equals mc squared, and being coming from that part of my brain, that I could understand. And I think for me, I had so much darkness attached to me, and having, being prayed with, and literally feeling the darkness leave. And sometimes it would hesitate. But when it left me, I felt so much lighter. And that was a big thing for me as well. And I do believe that the future of, and someone just asked me this weekend, well, what do you think about medicine? Because they know I'm a nurse, and I said, I think the future of medicine is energy medicine. And they said, well, why do you say that? So I told them a little bit about my experience. And they were like bowled over. I said, considering the fact that I probably would not be here right now to tell you about this, it's because of what I've done with quantum.
And what were you doing this weekend, Laura? How many people were you with? That's kind of neat.
Oh gosh, there was probably 100 people total. I was on an evangelization retreat, and I gave my testimony, about my alcoholism and my daughter's death and my healing.
Oh, that's an amazing thing, and for people that have struggled with environmental illness, you'll know that is such a huge place to come from being where we were at one point isolated, and literally the thought of being in a room with or a place with 100 people would be terrifying.
Dancing, and I was dancing for the Lord and having a really good time.
Good.
Crying and dancing.
One of the things that I just want to convey to others that are listening to this is, with anything, any disease process, it's not easy. It's frightening. When you try something like quantum techniques, it's different. And everyone's experience is different, as you can tell. There's 3 different cases, 3 different experiences. Don't give up. Even if you try QT and you do something else, and say it's not for me, just don't give up, because it's a place where I've been in, and you all have been there, of fear and feeling like it was hopeless. And keep trying, and even if it's with QT, keep trying, because it does work. It's about being open to your own things, I feel, your own experiences and your own traumas, and being able to release these things. What I find a lot of times with clients who get blocked is they're not sometimes able, and it's not putting blame on anyone or fault. It's just it's sometimes it's hard to look at your own things, at your own experiences. It's not always simple, and you know that, Loretta. You had to do years and years of work before you could look at yourself and and realize these things. Or sometimes even with me, my own healing, to look at myself and say, oh wow, this is what I've been doing. This is part of why I've been so sick. And it's a process. To this day, I still will have some struggles. Thank God the health has been well, but with my own emotional stuff, things will come up. And I realize these are things that, for me, learned behaviors from childhood or traumas in childhood, and these are coming up. But it's so much nicer now to have a tool to be able to say, okay, these are just parts, and they're probably, and not to get into too much, for me, 2-year-old parts, that I got triggered a lot because of issues in my family. These are the parts that come up, and I know that these are the parts I need to address. And once I clear that, having a simple technique or way of doing it, of just addressing these parts and releasing them and the energies they hold, and then feeling the wellness emotionally, the emotional wellness in seconds is huge. And so I'm very grateful for the ability to do that, the ability to have that awareness, and again through quantum. And so I'm myself am grateful for knowing all of you and being able to be there part of your journey, and knowing that God is essentially the one that does all the healing, and thanking Him for bringing quantum to all of us.
I agree with that, Gisella.
Yeah. Thank you, Gisella, for all your hard work.
Yeah.
Well, you're
Thank
welcome.
you, Gisella.
You're welcome. Thank you all, because you all have been, have enriched my life too. So I I thank you guys, and if you guys have is there anything else that any of you would like to add, or I think other than that we can conclude.
Just don't give up.
Yeah.
You know, for anybody out there that feels helpless and hopeless, and don't give up, because there is a life for you if you choose to have it. And it is a choice, you know, to be willing to go through what you have to go through in order to get to the other side. For me, anyway, that's how it was. But not to give up. And life is great. It really is.
It is, especially when you get it back after being out of it for so long. Because what we were doing wasn't life at all. It was just existing.
Yes.
I concur. I was barely existing. And now I just love my life, love my family, have the energy to do the things I want to do.
Yep. Same. Same, yep. It's so nice to be able to be part of life and your family. That is such a gift that a lot of people hopefully will never have to receive the way we have. But I know we all are grateful.
Yeah.
Okay, girls, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you,
Gisella.
You're welcome.
All right.
You are very welcome.
So we are now done. So we're going to stop here.